Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Millennium TV Around the World News. This is Fozia Tawan with top stories. Obama pleads for Paris climate change deal. Saudi king meets Obama amid concerns over Iran deal. Migrant crisis, Germany to release funds to help regions cope. Syria war, France to prepare for IS air strikes. Former diplomat urges US to do more in migrant crisis. Yemen crisis, Qatar deploys 1,000 troops. Now the details. Speaking in Alaska, he said countries including his own were not doing enough to stop global warming. World powers met in Paris in December with the aim of agreeing to curb global temperature rises. Mr. Obama said now was the time to protect the one planet we have got while we still can. On this issue of all issues, there is such a thing as being too late. He told a meeting of foreign ministers from countries with Arctic interests soon after arriving in Alaska. That moment is almost upon us. While the Paris meeting will seek a deal to limit the rise in global temperatures to 2 degrees Celsius, there have been warnings that the goal is unlikely to be achieved. During his 3-day tour of Alaska, Mr. Obama will become the first sitting U.S. president to visit the area above the Arctic Circle. He will also hike on the exit declare that has suffered significant melts in recent years and will appear in a television show with adventurer Bear Grylls. President Obama has made the fight against climate change one of the constraints of his second term. Last month, he unleashed plans to cut U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by almost a third over the next 15 years. Some state governors said they would ignore the plan, while parts of the energy industry said they would fight it. Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Zubair said his country was satisfied that the deal would contribute to security and stability in the Middle East. He was speaking after King Salman held talks with Mr. Obama in Washington. It is King Salman's first trip to the United States since assuming the throne in January. The foreign minister said he hoped Iran would use the windfall from the lifting of sanctions for its own development rather than engage in what he termed as nefarious activities in the region. The president explained and affirmed that the agreement prevents Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, has a robust and undeterred inspections regime that includes inspections of all sites, and that has provision for snapback of sanctions should Iran violate the terms of their agreement, he added. Critics at home have accused Chancellor Angela Merkel of creating a dangerous precedent by opening Germany's borders. About 18,000 migrants arrived over the weekend after an agreement with Austria and Hungary to relax asylum rules. But Australia's Chancellor Werner Faymann was said the emergency measures must come to an end. He said they would move step by step towards normality after speaking to Chancellor Merkel and the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban on Sunday. Hungary had previously blocked migrants traveling to Western Europe, but dropped restrictions on Friday and shuttled people off the Australian border. The flow shows no sign of easing, with crowds still streaming across Hungary's border with Serbia. Officials in Germany say thousands more migrants are expected to arrive later. Speaking on Monday, Mr. Orban said, as long as we can defend Europe's outer borders, it is not worth talking about how many people we can take in. Mr. Orban said those migrants trying to reach Germany were seeking a German life, not physical safety. adding that if the stream continued, it would endanger Europe's Christian welfare status. Germany's announcement of extra funds came after talks on Sunday night between the two parties, which make up Chancellor Merkel's coalition. The government has agreed to give $3 billion to the federal, states and local councils, with a further $3 billion to fund federal programs such as benefit payments. He said France would start reconnaissance flights on Tuesday with a view to launching attacks, but ruled out sending troops on the ground. Russia has responded to growing concern that it is increasing its military support for President Bashar al-Assad. More than 220,000 people have been killed and more than 9 million displaced in the war in Syria. Speaking at his biennial news conference in Paris, Mr. Honnold said terror attacks had been planned from Syria against several countries, including France. My responsibility is to ensure that we are informed as much as possible on the threats to our country, he said. So I have asked the defense minister that from tomorrow, reconnaissance flights begin over Syria that will enable us to consider air strikes against Islamic State. He said it would be pointless and unrealistic for France to send ground troops into the country. But he added his government would continue to work for a political transition and slandered Syria's president. The United Nations is calling on European nations to accept up to 2 lakh refugees as part of a common strategy to address the increasingly dire migrant crisis affecting the region. EU leaders have been split over sharing the burden, as more and more refugees make the long and often perilous journey from conflict areas in the Middle East and Africa to Europe. Former U.S. State Department official Nicholas Burns tells the BBC that the U.S. lacks a concerned and consistent strategy in Syria, the starting point for many of the refugees. Mr. Burns, also former U.S. ambassador to NATO, says he wishes the Obama administration would do more to help European nations cope with the crisis. Last week, 60 soldiers from the Saudi-led coalition were killed at a base in Marib. The missile strike by Houthi rebels killed 45 UAE, 10 Saudi and 5 Bahraini soldiers. The troops died after an ammunition depot was hit in the town of Safir. Following the attack, Emirati warplanes launched airstrikes on targets across Yemen. The Houthi rebels described the attack as revenge for crimes committed by the Saudi-led coalition, which has carried out months of airstrikes in Yemen. The coalition is trying to restore the excellent president, who left as the Houthis gained control over much of the country. The UN says some 4,500 people, including at least 2,110 civilians, have been killed in fighting on the ground and by coalition airstrikes since late March. Coalition countries are thought to have sent several thousand troops to Yemen in an effort to restore President Abdurrahman Mansur Hadi to power. They helped southern militiamen opposed to the Houthis retake the southern port city of Aden in July and have since advanced northwards. Viewers, we will take a short break with the headlines here. EU referendum. Significant changes to rules for vote. Migrant crisis. Thousands arrive in mainland Greece. Venezuela prison fire. Took tube blade kills 17. Devote yourself for the country's development. PM to new police cadres. Viewers, let's move to the next news. The changes will focus on the so-called Prודה rules, which stop ministers using public money to campaign for one side from 28 days before such a vote. The government had wanted to suspend these laws so ministers could continue to discuss European matters in public. Some Tories urged this would favor the pro-EU camp, and now restrictions are likely to stay, but with exceptions. The Political Parties Elections and Referendums Act 2000 sets out a 28-day period ahead of any referendum during which ministers, government departments and local authorities are banned from publishing material relating to the issue in question. Prime Minister David Cameron claimed suspending these rules was necessary to allow the government to continue dealing with EU matters during the referendum period. Ministers also said the prudent rules would stop them being able to defend the national interest in Brussels. In June, 27 Tory MPs rebelled against the government's plans for suspension of the rules, which avoided defeat only because Labour chose to abstain. Then in July, from the Public Administration Committee said it was also unconvinced by ministers' arguments. In a critical report, it said such a move would cast a shadow of doubt over the propriety of the referendum on whether the UK should remain in the EU or leave. Two ships carrying more than 4,200 people traveled to Piraeus port at night after leaving Lesbos Island. The whole EU is struggling to deal with an undepartured influx of migrants. Hundreds of people, mostly from the Middle East, remain stranded outside a railway station in Hungary after police stopped them traveling through the EU. The EU's border control agency, Frontex, says 2,300 migrants arrived in Greece last week alone, an increase of 50% on the previous week. More than 160,000 people have arrived in Greece so far this year, already surpassing last year's total. The country's government says it lacks the resources to look after that many arrivals, but aid groups say authorities should be doing more. The cause of the blaze at Chocteau jail near the city of Valencia is still being investigated. Inmates said an electrical fault was to blame, but investigators have yet to provide an official report. Prisons in Venezuela are notoriously overcrowded and violent. Pressure group Venezuelan Prison Observatory says more than 300 inmates were killed in 2014. 9 men and 8 women died in the fire which spread through one of the units, officials said. Forensic experts are trying to identify the bodies. Relatives who gathered outside the morgue in Valencia said they believed the male victims were inmates, while the female ones were spending the night in the penitentiary. They said it was not unusual for visitors to spend Sunday night with their incarcerated partners. Officials say security inside and around the prison had been increased to stop inmates from rioting or attempting to escape. Venezuela has one of the highest crime and homicide rates in Latin America, and the judicial system is struggling to cope with the caseload. The prison population has been increasing, with many of those incarcerated waiting for trial. Discussions are set to focus on Syria and Iran, particularly the nuclear deal bitterly opposed by Mr. Netanyahu. Mr. Cameron said the UK remains staunch in its defense of Israel's right to exist and to defend itself. Pro-Palestinian campaigners have denounced Mr. Netanyahu's visit. There were angry conflicts about Downing Street on Wednesday between protesters demanding Mr. Netanyahu's arrest for what they say amount to war crimes in Gaza and pro-Israel activities. Although a petition calling for the Israel PM's arrest secured enough signatures to be considered for a debate in Parliament. The bid was rejected earlier this week because visiting heads of foreign governments have immunity from legal process and cannot be arrested or detained, the UK government said in a statement. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has asked the new career police officials to devote themselves to the development of the country and the nation by facing the current and future challenges with secretary and courage. You will have to devote yourself to the development of the country and the nation by facing the current and future challenges with courage and sincerity, the PM said while addressing the passing out parade of the 33rd BCS batch of assistant superintendents in the Bangladesh Police Academy on Thursday morning. Sheikh Hasina directed the new ASPs to uphold the glorious role the members of Bangladesh Police played during the Great War of Liberation. She also asked new police officers to earn the people's confidence by dealing with their problems with sincere and human outlook. You will have to remember that the people seek your help when they are in danger. So you will have to learn confidence of the mass people through giving legal services and human behavior, she said. The Prime Minister also directed them to give utmost priority to the fundamental rights, human rights, and the rule of law. She also hoped that the new cadres will continue to uphold the honor of the Bangladesh police. Viewers, now the business news. The U.S. rating agency said mounting political turmoil and the difficulties faced by President Dilma Rousseff's government in tackling growing debt was behind the decision. Brazil was awarded an investment-grade rating by S&P in April 2008 when the country's economy was on the rise. However, sliding commodity prices and austerity have created a recession. Ms. Rousseff's left-wing government had imposed austerity measures in a bid to avoid such a downgrade. S&P downgraded Brazil, Latin America's largest economy, sooner than had been expected. The move, a major setback for Finance Minister Joaquim Levy's attempts to shore up public finances, is likely to rock the Brazilian stock market on Thursday. S&P cut Brazil's rating from BBB- to BBB+, which denotes substantial credit risk. The outlook on the new rating remains negative, which means further downgrades could soon follow. The Consumer Price Index unexpectedly rose 2% in August from a year ago, mainly on higher food prices and not due to a pick up in economic activity. On the back of that, the Producer Price Index fell 5.9%, marking its 42nd consecutive month of declines. Deflation fears in China are growing as manufacturers continue to cut prices. The decline in the PPI was the biggest drop since the global financial crisis in 2009 due to falling commodity prices and supply and demand. Economists said the continuing fall in producer prices poses the risk of trickling through to consumer prices. The change in PPI is very worrying. It could affect corporate profitability, which in turn could affect consumption and the economy, said Ally Huiyan, economist at Shang and Wangu Securities. Viewers, now the sports news. The Metaldas want their annual $21,000 salary increased to AS 40,000. The move is part of a dispute over pay and conditions for the men's and women's game. Football Federation Australia said the union representing the players had made extraordinary demands which meant the tour could not take place. More than 60,000 tickets had been sold for the two matches against world champions the USA in Detroit and Birmingham, Alabama on 17 and 20 September. The tour had been in doubt when the squad pulled out of a training camp. Australia goalkeeper Lady Williams stated that the decision of withdrawal had been extremely difficult, but necessary to make FFA take their claims seriously. The previous collective bargaining agreement expired on 30 June and there has since been a bitter public relations war with no new deal reached so far, meaning that the women's squad had not been paid in 2 months. Last week, the men's team boycotted commercial appearances in Perth and ran up to their World Cup qualifier against Bangladesh. Gallup said the wage increases that Players Union Professional Footballers Australia was demanding for the scorers, men's league players and the Matadors could not be met. He claimed that the FFA had offered an interim deal to the Players Union. This is competition in which the clubs lost a collective A17M last season, Gallup said. What we have today is an extraordinary situation in which the two male playing groups in the Sox Saucers and LA continue to be paid by FFA and LA clubs, but the female players aren't being paid. This could have been fixed today if the PFA had accepted the interim deal. Viewers, let's have a look Millennium TV Around the World News Recap. Obama pleads for Paris climate change deal. Saudi king meets Obama amid concerns over Iran deal. Migrant crisis, Germany to release funds to help regions cope. Syria war, France to prepare for IS air strikes. Former diplomat urges US to do more in migrant crisis. Yemen crisis, Qatar deploys 1,000 troops. Dear viewers, you are up to date with our top stories so far here on Millennium TV, and don't forget to log in www.millenniumtv.net. Thank you and stay with Millennium TV. Allah Hafiz.